She's written about the idea of climate change as a cultural crisis. Connor emphasizes that the pollution paradigm and the doom and gloom messages spark negative emotions about the future. And she argues that this kind of negativity generates defense mechanisms, and it sends people back to the life-affirming messages of consumer capitalism. She says we need to recognize that consumer capitalism is not just an economic system, but it's a very powerful cultural system of values and practices that sustains illusions of happiness and well-being and immortality. So Connor asks, how, as anthropologists, can we help to forge a new system of meaning that can replace these old religions of consumerism? So one approach is to look for convergences and synergies between what needs to be done on the climate change front and what will improve human well-being. Look at the intersection of these axes of environment and justice. So a number of climate experts are arguing to reframe the climate issue around human dignity, asking how we can achieve energy access for all, recognizing that a lot of people in developing countries like Brazil, where I work, don't need to be told to cut back on their energy or resource use. They need more in order to have health-affirming, life-enhancing things like refrigerators, electric lights. So asking how we can reframe climate change around human dignity, achieve energy access for everyone who needs it, along with economic development that doesn't interfere with Earth's systems and that helps us become more prepared to deal with risk and future dangers. So the key here is to find ways to work with human desires and aspirations for a better life. So trying to think about where to look for these synergies, these intersections between environment and social justice. One key is to break the division between ecology and economy, bring those back to be seen as things that go together, that should work together. Some of the best examples are international. In Africa, the Greenbelt movement under Wangari Maathai was a tree planting movement that began in Kenya in the mid-1970s as a community-based movement in which thousands of women joined together to plant trees to reforest degraded, eroded soils. To date, they've planted something more than 40 million trees. And if you think about trees as carbon sinks, this is an enormous contribution on the climate front. But as Maathai said, when we started planting trees, we certainly weren't thinking about climate change. Women got into this movement because the disappearance of the trees and the forest had made firewood scarce. And they were having to go farther and farther and spend more and more of their labor and their daughters' labors to collect firewood. And the degradation of the soils with the erosion from the disappearance of the trees was undermining these women farmers' ability to feed their families. So the tree planting began for economic reasons, but it had enormous ecological benefits. There's another current initiative out there that involves synergies between black carbon, firewood, cooking stoves, female literacy, and water supplies in Asia. Some really interesting ideas have come together in the last few years out of several UN reports about women's status and climate change. In many communities, especially in Asia and Africa, women and girls have to walk many, many miles to get water every day. And with drought and shrinking forests, they have to go farther and spend more time collecting firewood. A key reason why girls don't attend school is that their families need them to collect wood and water. And studies have found that in parts of Africa where forests have been depleted, female literacy rates have declined because girls have to spend more time working, collecting wood and water. One study reported that in Uganda, where there have been droughts, families are marrying off their daughters much earlier in order to get bride payments so that they have more ability to cope with food shortages when droughts occur. And these young married girls are not in school, and since their husbands often have multiple sex partners, Girls are getting exposed at a much younger age to sexually transmitted diseases. So there's a strong public health connection here too. So black carbon is a term that's being used for soot, for the stuff that you can actually see, which is really refreshing after all these invisible greenhouse gases. So black carbon is this particulate air pollution that comes mostly from burning wood and diesel. And these particles in the atmosphere affect the reflectivity of the Earth's surface. In Asia, when the soot from all of this combustion goes into the upper atmosphere and then comes down on the vast snowpacks and glaciers of the mountains of Central Asia, the black particles do what black particles do on your driveway if you have snow. They attract solar energy, and the ice and snow melt much more quickly. It's been suggested that with the growing accumulation, and there's scientific evidence of black carbon, that we may approach a tipping point where there's a shift from the snow reflecting solar energy to the ice turning into heat-absorbing water and melted runoff. So Asian rivers that are the water source for a lot of the world's population are fed by these glaciers, which will flood when the ice melts faster and then run dry. The upbeat point here is that unlike greenhouse gases, this particulate soot, black carbon stuff, doesn't stay in the air very long. In a matter of weeks, it settles down. So if you can reduce it, there's an immediate effect. So it's one of the few really quick, direct interventions that are possible. And so one possible target that's being worked with to reduce black carbon is cooking stoves in Africa and Asia. There's a synergy here with health effects of pollution. The UN estimates that there are well over 1 million deaths each year, mostly of women and children, from respiratory problems related to wood-burning cook stoves and the smoke that fills kitchens where women and children spend a lot of their time. So programs are underway to try to introduce more efficient, less polluting stoves, which means less combustion, less stress on firewood, less time for women and girls to have to spend collecting firewood, and these positive health benefits. So this is exactly the kind of intervention that sounds really good, but as anthropologists we know, messing around with how people cook, maybe changing the way that food tastes, or the social relations that take place in the kitchen around the hearth, who knows? So this is the kind of thing where anthropologists need to be right in there, prepared to study and consult. So looking for synergies closer to home here in the South, public health and environmental issues are a really fertile intersection. So for example, asthma and climate-related pollution. With warmer, wetter winters and long springs like the one we're in right now, there's an increase in pollen-producing plants and molds in cities as well as rural areas. So in urban areas, you've got plants spreading into and proliferating in inner cities in ways that they haven't done in the past, and especially in urban neighborhoods and housing projects that tend to be located close to freeways and factories, where you've got ground level ozone in the air created when sunlight and chemicals from the car exhaust interact. All of this is a major factor in the very high and growing rates of asthma among children in the urban city. So public health environmentalism is one real synergy to look for in our own communities. Another area of synergy is more general social dissatisfactions. One of the major ones that it's interesting to think about is time stress. So there's a Take Back Your Time movement that I find really interesting, and they propose my favorite new national holiday, which is October 24th for Take Back Your Time Day. Does anybody know why October 24th? October 24th is the day that if the average American worker had the same amount of paid vacation time as the average European worker, that would be the last day of the work year. Another movement along the same lines is in favor of affirming the importance of vacations, time off. So these are social dissatisfactions where it's possible to open conversations with people that may have potential synergies. A lot of other potential synergies involve creating new jobs and new forms of livelihood, especially for disadvantaged groups. And thinking about this, one of the things that's interesting to think about for the South is that in terms of green energy conversion, all those things that we probably all would really like to have done in our houses in terms of, insulating our air ducts and, switching over to more efficient systems and retrofitting and all of that kind of thing. The major job categories in the South for these green energy conversion jobs are disproportionately in industries employing Hispanics. And these jobs tend to pay well, and there's a lot of work to be done. So food movements are happening everywhere. At Vanderbilt, food politics has captured my students' attention like nothing I've ever seen. I'm teaching a class in this right now, and it's astonishing what energy there is. It's interesting from an anthropological perspective to think about why food has emerged as such a hot topic for activism and engagement. What is it about food and politics that's so compelling? And I think that we could, each of us off the top of our heads, probably come up with some really good ideas. It's something that we do all the time. Everybody thinks about it. We do it several times a day. It has a lot to do with identity. It has a lot to do with practical action. It also connects to community and sociality. It's pleasure and celebration that can be shared across all kinds of differences. Eating together it's the primal human social activity. So what we see happening around food in Nashville, I think, is probably happening in all of your communities. We have our local version of the explosion of farmers markets and CSAs and local food initiatives and new local food businesses and distilleries, which were just legalized in Tennessee last year. There's a lot of activity going on with urban gardens and permaculture. It's African American activists, some of them from the generation of civil rights and some of them much, much younger, in particular, have really taken up a wide variety of innovative projects involving not just community gardens, but also individual entrepreneurship with urban farming and permaculture. And collaborations and exchanges are popping up all over the place between city people and country people who are getting to know each other in new ways. So when anthropologist Ann Kingsolver took over as director of the Appalachian Studies Center at the University of Kentucky this year, this was one of the things that she pointed to as a trend that anthropologists should pay attention to, a kind of growing intensification of urban-rural relationships where we may see a new kind of emerging regionalism. And this brings me to the final and in some ways the most important issue for us as anthropologists. I think that one of the things that we have to offer in these processes of civic cultural transformation is our clarity about the fact that there are other ways to live. There are other value systems and social arrangements that can create rich, satisfying, meaningful lives. This is one of anthropology's unique strengths as a discipline. I'm sure that many of you, like me, find yourself standing up there in front of, Anthro 101 intro classes, repeating ad infinitum. Anthropology is the discipline that takes into account the full range of human possibilities, the realities of human societies in all places and all times. And, it's really true. Whether out of our own experience working with non-Western societies as I do, or out of, the huge amount of reading and learning that we've done, we know that fundamental truth that Margaret Mead was so sure about, it doesn't have to be this way.